Shall we continue? Our next speaker is Danielle Hill. She is the youth coordinator. What's your title?
Youth Affairs Coordinator.
Youth Affairs Coordinator with the Humanist Alliance Philippines-International. OK， 我们下一个长者是 Danielle Hill， 她是从菲律宾来的。那她的社会是菲律宾人文主义联盟。我们欢迎她。
Okay, so thank you all. Now, my topic is about Sheherazade the Millennial, which is a really long title, and I hope you'll excuse me for that. I'll take questions after each part of the talk, so just feel free to chime in when you can. Okay? All right? Please don't be so sleepy. I know you had booze, but come on, this is my first time talking. Have some energy, people. Thank you, whoever who. Okay, so now in Asia, there's a huge storytelling tradition. We love telling stories here. In China. There is a book called Records of the Historians, which tells about the stories of basically the 500 years of civilization China has. And it's not just any history book. It's a record of who did what. And those records of who did what are really, really important. And telling their stories is really important because it's what connects us not only to our own humanity, but it's what links us to our past and our communities and our future. Now, Robert McKee here says that storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world today because you can give people logic. You can keep people logic all you want, but if it doesn't strike a chord into their heart, it's just going to be all data to them. The data is not going to mean anything. So I'm going to start. One of my main premises is going to be that humans have an intrinsic need to feel important. And is there anybody who is going to contest that among the humans here? No? No contention. Okay, great then. So narratives are really important because that's what gives us our sense of importance, our sense of community. And one of the most famous stories in the world is a story about 1001 Stories, in which there's a demented king and a female protagonist, and in which the female protagonist saved the kingdom from the demented king by means of telling 1001 stories until she wore the king down. And what's funny about this story is that it comes from the place in Asia where women are now not so respected, in fact, repressed. 1001 Nights comes from Persia, which is now Iran. Am I right? Am I right? Okay. And in Iran, can anybody tell me what just recently happened to a woman in Iran? Okay, Iran and Pakistan, that's what happened, Kandil Baluch. Now, we tell stories every day, but one of the most popular ways where we can tell stories is by using the internet and social media. And that's where a lot of us engage in our activism, right? We have humanist bloggers here, we have YouTubers, we have podcasts. Wade, your podcast. Okay. All right. So we use the internet every day to make use of stories. But the thing about these stories is that depending on who is telling them, the reaction is very, very different. So women in Asia, when they tell stories, this one is called Maris Umali, and she's a journalist in the Philippines. And what happened to her was she was catcalled. by the president. So yeah, it caused a really big fuss, and the presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo basically said he's a teaser, he's a playful person, he's kind. Pag ikaw biniro niya, ibig sabihin malapit ka sa kanya. If he teases you like that, that means you're close to his heart. That means he's fond of you. So okay, a lot of negative backlash to that. And then here's another Filipino woman who is an activist, Rene Carunungan. During the election season, she went vocally anti-Duterte, who is now our president, and after she posted her anti-Duterte posts on her Facebook, she got hate mail, but not just ordinary hate mail. This translates to your mom is a whore, if you don't like Duterte, shut up, my penis is cleaner than your face, fuck you. I have a friend who wants to kill you. You have money anyway, so ready it so you can pay for the hospital bills. Yeah, she got around 2,000 of those things. And of course, the most high-profile case in Pakistan, Danielle Hill, who was called the Kim Kardashian of Pakistan, who was killed by her own brother because she wasn't bringing honor to the family. Because she was not modest. She was drugged and then strangled to death. Did you guys hear about that? Okay. So we're all on the same page here. So why are women going through this? If a man speaks up on social media about his activism, is there that kind of abuse hurled to him? Can anybody give me any anecdotes to which a man received rape and death threats for posting his mind on social media? Yes, please. Thank you.
I have not rape threats.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I'm not attractive, but definitely death threats, but not in the same way as women posting on social media.
I see. Thank you so much. All right then. So the question is, why are we going through this? Why is the negative reaction to women's posts different from men's posts? I'll try to answer that later on. But of course, whatever the reason is, people are fighting back on social media. I'm sorry if all my stories are about social media. I do live in the social media capital of the world. All right. So when Duterte wolf whistled to Maurice O'Malley, there was a lot of negative reaction from Twitter, because yeah, it's all in English. So you understand. So yeah. And then Rene Carunungan did not back down. When she received all those death and rape threats, she went straight to the courts, printed out every single instance, and sued those people. And of course, on Twitter, after Danielle Hill was murdered, everybody chimed in to say how honor killing is wrong. There was even a hashtag, justice for Danielle Hill, no honor in honor killing. But the interesting thing is that this fighting back came with its own backlash. Rafi Tima, that guy over there, that's the husband of Maurice O'Malley. He said, catcalling my wife is wrong in so many levels, and then the response, then let your wife stay at home and be a wife. Interesting thing. That was a woman who said that. Rene Carunungan, this was a woman. Charis Mahilum, one of her bashers said, don't be stupid, wake up. You don't know what's happening to the Philippines, which is led by biased people and corrupt. Fuck you, you deserve to be bashed. And then finally, on Twitter, Kandil Baluch, as you can see. Funny thing, all of this abuse came from our fellow females, which is really interesting because you would expect that from the male chauvinists, from the patriarchal ones who want to keep the status quo, but you wouldn't expect that from your fellow female, right? After all, you're fighting the same fight. You all want the same thing. So the question is, why is this happening? And there was a study conducted by the Pew Research Center, I think, that outspoken women do experience more abuse online, harassment, rape threats, and death threats. And the interesting thing is that most of the abuse, or rather a majority of the abuse, comes from other women. So why is this happening? Maybe because it's a patriarchal and misogynistic society, they internalized it. Maybe because they were raised in the traditional way that women should be silent and receptacles for the family's honor. Maybe it's religious indoctrination. The whole what did St. Paul say about women keeping silent in church? Was that St. Paul?
Yes, but it was forgery.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. All right, thank you. Is it poverty? Could it possibly be the fact that they're too poor to know otherwise? Are they too stupid to know otherwise? Maybe it's all of them. See, the thing is, it's too easy to blame one thing or another for all our misfortunes. If women are getting beaten up in Pakistan, it's so easy to say, oh, it's because of Muslim extremism. If women are being stoned to death in Saudi Arabia, it's easy to say, oh, it's the Wahhabis' fault. But the thing is, oppressions do not exist in a vacuum. It's not just one circle, it's a series of interconnected circles. Now, the default approach to these problems is our humanism. We say that, no, you shouldn't treat women that way because women are people. How did you get that? We got that from the humanists. When you say humanist, what do you mean? Oh, these people said this. This is our philosophy. But humanism, as we practice it, is essentially a Western construct. Like I was asking about earlier, is there a humanist tradition native in Asia? Because that would really, really help. Now, our humanism is based on values, innovation, individualism, and going against the grain. And we have a really great message. But the thing is, how we give it, that's going to be a really big thing. Because in a lot of cases, perception does become reality. So, let's take a look at the famous humanist founders who founded this philosophy. In the Enlightenment era, there was Thomas More, who criticized the Catholic Church and gave the values of secularism. Erasmus of Rotterdam says, religious tolerance, no private property. Juan Luis Vives emphasized the need to base human knowledge on reason and nature rather than supernatural things. Now, can anyone tell me what these people have in common? Okay, tell me more. Anyone?
dudes.
Huh?
We're all three white dudes.
Bingo. And where are they from?
Europe.
Europe. What countries? Thomas More comes from England. Erasmus of Rotterdam was Dutch. Juan Luis Vives, Spanish. Does anybody see where I'm going with this? Now, all of them were Europeans who belonged to, what did Tassie say? Old Europe. Old Europe. While they were getting the Enlightenment, we were getting from them this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Basically, Asia's experience with Europe and these white dudes can be summarized with one scene from Pocahontas. Yeah. Okay. All right then. So as a result of that being colonialized, there have been a lot of movements in politics. Post-colonial mentality says, okay, these white dudes have been here for too long. We gotta boot them out and carve out our own legacy. We are our own people. So you have the nationalist elements there. Now, they're trying to build their culture up from the bottom, but in Asia's history, we've been a little bit too busy fending off the colonialists that we haven't been able to build up our own ethnicity, our own nationality, our own religion. What happened was we had a religion, we had our own belief systems in those days. And then these Westerners came around and then they introduced their own to us. Okay, I'll get that later. Now, because we were colonialized, we were othered. Asians were marginalized. So you have this complex now that's happening. Now another thing is representation. Here is a picture. Here is a list of people who can be considered as famous atheists and humanists. Can anybody tell me what they have in common? What's missing from the picture?
Asians.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so anyway, in this picture you see the most famous humanists and atheists that we have today. When you think of humanism, you think of these guys. Now, where in that list of people are the people who look like me, or Taxi, or Emily, or Rana? Where are the people with our skin tones, our noses? Where are the ones with the dark hair and dark eyes? Thank you. Another reason why it's probably why our medium is not that effective is because of the cultural frameworks that we have. And I think it was Mr. Peng who talked about the differences between Asian thinking and European thinking. Now, I have here some cultural frameworks. There are two kinds of cultures. There are high context and low context cultures. In low context cultures, you have the ideas of task-centeredness, attention, verbal, explicit, direct, very light, very direct, very European. This is how we usually argue our cases. But in high context cultures, you have people who are more attuned to how they relate with the people around them rather than themselves. They pay attention to the group dynamics. It's more collectivist than individualist. There's that whole thing about saving face. In my country, we call it mukha or delicadeza, that sort of thing. There's this thing about keeping relations smooth and balanced, not going against the flow, but going with the flow, the whole xing and she thing. Yeah? Okay. So anyway, what we have status quo right now, how we're trying to present humanism is we're trying to attacking the center of things. But what is the center? Where is the center of the problems? And the thing is that because intersectionality exists, there is no such thing as a center. There is a group of centers. There are a group of frameworks that you have to take note of. Now let's take a look at the high context versus low context cultures. We are here. The people the famous humanist people are here. So you see the possible problem about miscommunication, about not being able to give the message correctly, right? Is everybody following me so far? Okay. Any questions so far? Any questions? Yes.
It's interesting the point that a lot of the famous humanists come from the middle ground.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like missionaries going both ways.
Yes. In the past, here's how missionaries did it. In the past, they were all like, these are savages. We're going to bring civilization to them. We're going to bring God to them. Missionaries now are a little bit different. Their tack is more on God is already there. We just have to bring it out. We just have to introduce our concepts and see what clicks with them. So it's more hybrid right now than it was before. So basically, all the three reasons I gave. One, POCs may not listen to white heralds because of the history we have with them, bad history we have with them. POCs won't be able to relate to the white humanist narrative because our experiences have been different. They have been able to develop their own humanist identities on their own. We have not. We were denied that privilege. We were denied that. Lastly, what does this mean? If they're not going to listen to white stories, if they're not going to listen to the Western humanist perspective, we need to tell their stories and form an Eastern humanism, Eastern humanist thought, which is what I was asked, which is why I was asking earlier. Is there a tradition? Is there a humanist tradition that is native to us, that we built, that wasn't brought by foreigners? But okay. So I'm thinking of a rebuttal here. That says the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. What if their stories are intrinsically patriarchal? I mean, in India, you have the story of Rama and Sita, in which Sita has to prove that she did not sleep with the monkey demon, so she has to walk through fire to do that. And you have a lot of stories about filial piety and about women staying inside the house. So what if those are their stories? But, as Michael said, he said to find humanistic principles in ancient texts, you have to dig deep. Well, in Asia, you have to dig deeper. Before those religious texts, not native to us, came, what was there? This code only applies if we accept the master-slave dynamic, if we accept that the stories were inherently patriarchal, if we accept the fact that our history books say that men are superior than women, this only applies if we don't question where the narrative is coming from. Now let's take a look at the literature, legends, and lore of Asia, because, like I was saying earlier, I call it Scheherazade the Millennial because in Iran and in Pakistan, women are not at all emancipated. And yet the supreme irony is that the most famous import coming from that region is a story about a woman who saved the day, saved the city, saved the entire country from a mad king. The question is, where are all the women? Now, let's talk about stories. I already gave you this, but here's a quote by Plato that I really like. Stories are also a means of warfare. The religious people, the ones with the holy books, their religions stick because they keep telling their stories over and over again. They tell the story of Jesus Christ's life. They tell the story of Muhammad. They give us these people who we can look up to. And because they keep telling their stories, we keep accepting their stories. But what if we have stories of our own to counteract that? I'll give you a case. In my country, there is a thing called the Lagang Pilipina. Who has been in the Philippines here? Okay? Does anybody know what this term means? Yes, please. Thank you. Okay,
Madonna in the bedroom, Madonna in the kitchen, or whatever.
Thank you so much, Jason. Yes, the Dalagang Pilipina dichotomy is the idea that a good woman has to be mahinhin, shy, subservient, modest, turns away when there's a suitor. Now on the opposite side, if you don't fit the Madonna, you're called malande. Malande is basically flirt. A malande woman is flirtatious, and sometimes that comes with and sometimes they put in independent and critical. They're called westernized liberated women. And in a lot of conservative circles in the Philippines, the word liberated is a bad word. And a career-driven instead of a family-oriented woman. Pang-altar versus pang-laspag. This is the woman that a man wants to marry. This is the woman a man wants to have sex with. Now, where did that Madonna horror complex come from? Because that wasn't there originally. I'm going to go back to Philippine mythology over here. This is Anansinaya. She is the goddess of the ocean. The Philippines is an archipelagic country. The water is very important. This is a deity they pray to when if they don't want to drown. This is, what's her name? I forgot. This is Mayari. Mayari is the goddess of the moon. And fun fact, I love Mayari's stories. The myth goes that Mayari was the daughter of the Allfather, Bathala. When Bathala retired from his duty, there was Mayari and then there was Apolaki, her brother. Now Apolaki wanted to rule the sky on his own. Mayari wouldn't have any of it. So the two fought until Mayari lost an eye. And then when Apolaki saw what he did, he got down on his knees and apologized to Mayari. Because what Mayari wanted was an equal share of the sky. Mayari got what she wanted. She got the night sky, Abulahi got the day. Why is the night so dark? Because Mayari only has one eye. Lastly, and this is my favorite myth, the myth of Bakunawa and Halia. Legend says that once upon a time there were 7 moons, and that there was a moon-eating dragon called Bakunawa. Now, he ate 6 moons before Halia, the masked goddess of the moon, killed Bakunawa. These women are not meek and subservient. These women were the women that warriors prayed to. Now let's go to history. In pre-Hispanic Philippines, women had the right to inherit property. We were engaged in trade and industry. We could be datus, we could be chieftains. Now, and the most important part, because religious life was very important to the ancient Filipinos, there was the babaylan or the Catalona, women priestesses. And they were healers and they were midwives, they were medicine women. They were the crux of every community. A male could perform religious rites, but only if he dressed up with the robes of babaylan. Now, not only that, but there's one tribe in the south of the Philippines, the Teduray, they even had a concept of transgenderism. The Mentifulawe Libun, male to female, and the Mentifulawe Lagay, female to male. We did not have a concept of virginity either. Virginity was, being a virgin was considered, how do I say this, unattractive, because the goal of sex in those days was procreation. Was not procreation, but pleasure. The babies were a bonus. Now, when the Spaniards came, they did not like this independence at all. They did not like the fact that we were progressive, that we had our own identities, because they wanted to colonize us. They wanted to go in for resources. What did Cassie say about that? Okay. Old Europe went to Asia for resources. In my country, we have a term for this, the 3G. God, gold, glory. Ostensibly, this was why they came, but mostly what they did was use God to get the gold and the glory. So, of course, the independent mujer indígena was a threat to the Spaniards, so they began to demonize the strong women. Hence, the myth of the aswang and the manananggal was born. Now, this is the aswang and the manananggal, our version of a vampire. Of a vampire. This is a woman. The manananggal is more often than not a woman with long hair, and at night she could cut herself in half, and the top half grows wings like a bat and flies off to eat pregnant women's babies. Also, she lived in the woods. Also, she was knowledgeable. She knew what plants to use. She subscribed to the old gods and rejected the authority of the friars. This was the template of the aswang. Does it look familiar?
Which one?
Yep. Of course, the Spanish succeeded, so when in the latter part of the years they had La Mujer Cristiana, we were civilized and turned Christian. From this, we became this. And it was so prevalent that our national hero even wrote a book about it. The book is called Noli Me Tangere. Does it ring a bell to anybody? Noli Me Tangere? No. Okay. So it was a book about the excesses of the friars in those early eras, and it had a love interest. It was about Crisostomo Ibarra, who was a scholar in Madrid and came back to the Philippines to do some good in his home country. Now, Ibarra's fiancée was Maria Clara, a tragic heroine, the bastard daughter of Padre Damaso, who was the main antagonist. And when told in the latter part of the story, spoiler alert, that Ibarra had died, but not really. When she was told that Ibarra had died, she insisted going into a convent. Also, when she found out that her father was not her father, but the parish priest, she decided to keep it a secret, to keep the honor of her own father and of her foster father and her real father. An honorable woman. Now contrast that to the women of Malolos, real women who, this was during the time when women were not allowed to be educated or to be taught Spanish, because the friars thought that learning Spanish would make us revolt, which we did anyway. So yeah, when the friars rejected their plea to open up a night school for women for them to learn Spanish, they wrote a petition, all 20 of them, they wrote a petition, went up to the Governor General's office, banged on his door, and had him read it while they were there, just to make sure the friars didn't do anything while they weren't around. So these were indomitable women. And these were the women that did not have a very big place in the history books of the Philippines when it came to the revolution. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because women have been overlooked. It's not in lore and in literature. Asia is a curious beast because we have had our own ideologies way before the Europeans discovered us. It was just that our cultures were eradicated before we were able to outgrow them, maybe, like that. Now let's take a look at the women in lore and literature. In lore, in Iran, where Baluch was killed, we have Banu Gosas. Did I pronounce that right? Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In ancient literature, she was a woman who rescued a fairy king from the king of all genies, fought and killed demons with her brothers in India. She embroidered her own portrait, which became world famous, defeated an endless stream of warriors, and when a warrior insulted her for being a woman, she said she was going to shave off his beard, chop him up, feed him to the dogs. And she did. Not necessarily in that order. In India, where Suti has been practiced until recently, we have Durga, who was the goddess of the victory of good over evil, also the goddess of mothers. This is not a woman to be trifled with. And in China, the most famous woman is Mulan. She was so famous that even Disney made a film out of her. Did anybody see that film? Thank you so much, gentlemen. Okay, was it a good movie, yeah? Alright. Now, let's move on to the women who were in actual history. In Iran, there's scholars of Masagate, which is another warrior queen. Onake Obawa from India. Fun fact. Does anybody know her story? No, okay. Onake Obawa lived during the time where there was a war between two cities. And their city was walled, and there was a siege going on. Now, while she was crushing rice with her big pestle, she noticed that there was a hole in the ground where enemy soldiers were pouring in, were trying to dig. So she made a human guacamole. Every time a head popped out, bang, and then she would drag the body out to the side so that on a big pile. And then there were 1,000 of those, and at the end there were 1,000 bodies piled up over there. Not bad, eh? Now in Pakistan, here we have a Sikh called Mai Bab Kaur. I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but yes, another Sikh saint. And she was known as one of the most relentless and most brutal of the lady commanders in that army. In Japan, you have Empress Jingu. Does this story look familiar? No? Okay. Research her later. And in China, Princess Ping Yang, Qin Shi, and Ti Ying. Princess Ping Yang, another warrior soldier. I'm sorry, no. She lived during the ancient times, and she took up arms. And she was the first woman to be buried with full military honors. When that happened, the military said to her father, but there is no precedent for burying women with a military march. And her father replied, my daughter is the precedent. Qin Shi, also known as the most badass pirate this side of the ocean, was one of the few pirates who was able to retire, get away with everything. Lady commander as well. Ti Ying was a daughter of a higher-ranking official whose actions were the reason why there was better medical services for the military during that time. I've forgotten a bulk of the story, so you could research them if you want. They're really awesome women. And in Vietnam, there are the Trong sisters, Trong Trác and Trong Thi. They were also called Truong Vuong, King Truong. They co-ruled their part of Vietnam together, queens in Asia, who actually did something, who were not just ceremonial. Now, what am I getting at over here? If you've read the synopsis of my speech, it's basically all in there. What feminists want, gender equality, it's not a new thing. It's not a Western construct. It's always been there. It's just that the storytellers have all been male, chauvinist ideologues whose best interest it was in to erase women from the narrative. So what have we got to do now? Dig deep. Dig very, very deep. Find the women and tell their stories. That's all. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions for Danielle?
Anyone? Okay, sure.
For those of you who don't know, we've been translating the Amsterdam Declaration, which is the International Statement on Humanism, into several languages, Nepalese, Urdu, Tagalog, as well as Arabic. It's a noble endeavor, but after listening to it, I wonder if maybe translation is not what we should be doing, but instead producing Asian declaration, maybe a Manila declaration. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's talk about it. Why not? It could. I mean, we've been doing things the Western way, and it could work in some cases, but in other cases it may not work. So in the cases where it doesn't work, let's try that other thing. The important thing is to get the message across. Yes?
Yeah, I think I may be barking up the same tree, and sometimes it's unfortunate, but that I have to say that as a white male, because it almost sounds a little bit self-defeating. But when you think about communication technology or agricultural technology or medical technology, those are all good ideas, they're global ideas. And I kind of view humanism the same way, that it's a set of ideas that that's global. So if you think about Asian humanism, what would be different about it as opposed to the humanism that Wade was talking about in that document?
Actually, I like the humanism that we have right now. But the thing is, the examples that we're using, the representatives that we have, the heralds that we have for the humanist movement are mostly old white males. And the problem is not the message. The problem is representation. There is no problem with the message. The thing that we have to improve is the medium of communication, because it would be better, probably they would be able to relate to the humanist narrative more if we had examples that were coming from their own locale instead of being imported from elsewhere.
Oh yes, so I was thinking about, you're kind of looking at, a lot of your speech was through the lens of like European imperialism towards Asian countries.
Yes.
And but I think that a lot of the same thing kind of happened towards when the Romans, and they brought Christianity to the Celts and other cultures more northern Europe. And do you think that this lens, do you think that it just extends, is it the same, is it an extension of the same thing, or do you see it strictly through strictly a European towards Asian kind of lens, or is it a continuation? I guess is the question.
Probably it's a continuation. I mean, cultural experiences, historical experiences are colorblind. If the same thing happened to the Celts with the Romans, as what happened with the Europeans and the Asians, then of course the narrative would be the same. There would be no difference. As long as it's the same story being told that is true to that culture's experience.
Your point about the low context and high context, and low context being very direct. Now, I've lived and worked in Asia for 13 years, and I tend to be very direct. So from a business perspective, you were mentioning face.
Yes.
Do you think that could be part of the problem? You said you've got all these white faces up there, the secular humanists, because we tend to be more direct, whereas the Asian cultures do tend to be very much more, we can't come right out and say what it is, we have to dance around the issue, which as a white guy working here can be very frustrating, like what's the problem and let's solve it, let's not dance around the issue and pretend it doesn't exist. So do you think it's that high context of not directly attacking the problem that is part of the issue, of why that all those people are all Westerners?
That's quite a loaded. That's a loaded question, because I can't necessarily say that low context is better than high context or vice versa. I'm using the lens of what Pang said, the Xing Shi. This is what happened. These are the factors why it happened. So these are how we should probably react based on those factors. Now, I'm not sure from a business perspective what that would mean. Probably it would be best if you're in business, to meet halfway, interculturalism is a thing after all. But
that picture of all the secularists, you say there's nobody that looks like you. So is that because they're more indirect, and the Western secularists are much more outspoken?
Okay. When I said face, that means saving. That's like saving face. You don't want to be humiliated. You don't want to be humiliated in front of people. It's not the literal face.
No, I know the concept, but I'm saying, you asked why are there no people that all those famous secularists? Why are there no Asians? So my question to you is because we're low context and direct, and that's why the Asians aren't in there, because they're very indirect and very nonverbal.
I'm not sure because in Asia there are very famous philosophers who could be tagged as humanists who lived way before these white dudes did.
But now, today, is that why you don't see a lot of people in that list that are Asian? Because they're just not speaking up the way Richard Dawkins does?
Probably, yeah. Probably it's one of the factors. Another thing is that we're not getting that much attention from our more privileged Western brethren. So, in this era where communication is rampant, I think what the Asian humanist community needs is media mileage. We need to speak up and talk about our experiences that are unique to us, not just rehash the things that the white dudes have been saying. So the concept of narratives and using our own narratives to forward the same story still fits. We just haven't been doing that yet, so maybe that's one of the reasons why.
This is just a question, yeah. Because you're focused on gender, do you have any ideas of, there are lots of counter-narratives, Asian counter-narratives by men, and some of them are Taoist, some are Confucian, some are not religious. Is there a specific or a significant counter-narrative specifically about what it means to be a man? A counter to the prevailing concept of masculinity that would be also humanistic in some way?
I'm not so sure about that. I haven't done that much research on that area, but I'll study it and get back to you when I can.
Throughout your presentation, you talked about Asia and Asians as though it is a coherent group.
Oh, no, it's not.
Okay, but you did talk about it that way. So if we accept that it's a hugely diverse group with diverse histories, is one response appropriate, or is there going to be a Vietnamese response and a Persian response and a Chinese response and a Japanese response?
Probably so. It's going to start off that, usually it starts off that way, with different groups making their own ideas, and then those ideas meet and then clash and then they coalesce. What's that? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Yeah, it makes sense because, of course, Korea's history of being colonized by Japan and other Asian countries is completely different than Philippines' history. Thank you.
Anything else?
Would you put the Mahatmas on the list?
Yes.
This is
Pardon?
Gandhi, did you put Gandhi in that row of humanists?
Did he consider himself a humanist?
I think what we
Okay, Gandhi is a polarizing character. There are some who really like him, there are some who don't. But if most of his philosophies are humanistic, we would probably say that he is a humanist. But I'm not so sure about tagging him, because we have to find something in his own writings that says this is what a human should be. There should be something about a humanist philosophy in his own writings. We can't.
a lot of writing.
Yes.
But he was a racist. He was also trying to fight for freedom. There's many things that
There's many things.
Let's give Danielle a round of applause.
Thank you.